The following episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor is adapted from The Wayward Wives by Will Doyle. Before we begin, the following adventure contains themes of suicide and infanticide which some viewers may find disturbing. If you have thoughts of self-harm, please call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988, link in the description. A mist has descended on the road out of Buttergroves as our heroes make their way in pursuit of the former owner of the boathouse toward the land owned by the regional lord and enforcer. Their next stop is the village of Wayward. The mist gives slightly as a crow swoops overhead, its harsh call cutting through the morning air. Ahead on a cliff overlooking the elf road, a lone figure stands atop a cliff. A young woman clutches a newborn babe to her chest, her white dress snapping in the morning breeze. Eyes closed, she extends her foot to step off of the cliff. All at once the four call out, various shouts to cease, stop, and concerns for the woman and her child. Desperate to calm the woman and save her and her child, the party attempts to engage her in conversation. Pilin is sent gliding up the cliff to guard the woman from any danger that might emerge from the gloom. Túrendil and Massul gather a blanket up to catch the woman before realizing that she would fall into the pools instead of down to them. Rill calls out to keep her talking, while Jynx encourages her to just stay in place while help comes up. Hesitantly, she gives her name, Ewella Ross from the nearby village of Wayward, wife of Jordan Ross and their daughter Ezra. Ewella is a pretty young thing, dark hair, fair-skinned and slight. Her bare feet are caked with dirt from ascending the roadside cliff. Her white clings to her in the whistling wind. Massul and Túrendil begin scrabbling up the wet rocky cliffs. She sobs, lamenting that her husband is cheating on her with a barmaid from the Hearthstone, one of the proprietor's 3 harlot daughters. The woman takes a step back from the ledge, still clutching her child to her bosom. Through tears, Ewella chokes out that Ezra would be better off dead than to be raised without a father. Several rounds of climbing, scrabbling, and level-headed negotiation later, the heroes convince Ewella to allow herself and Ezra to be escorted safely down to the bottom of the falls. They begin the trek back to her home, inquiring after the evil in Wayward. The conversation turns to Ned Pascoe's daughters just as the group reaches a crossroads, a signpost pointing to Wayward in one direction and simply marked Tavern in the other. By Ewella's account, the 3 daughters have charmed her husband away from her, along with other men from the town with their feminine wiles. The group eagerly offers to go set Jory straight, while Ewella pleads with them not to hurt her spouse. Massul compromises, offering to give the man a shiner and knock a bit of sense into him. Ewella's cottage sits beside a gnarled hawthorn tree, a rocking cradle creaks on the porch in the stiff breeze, and chickens forage in the muddy yard. Rilyanasse reins in her owl, concerned the beast might make a snack of the cottage's resident fowl. An uneasy feeling settles over the scene, and sharp-eyed Túrendil notices what he deduces are several signs of witchcraft. Blighted vegetables, a soured pail of milk, a dead rat beneath the cradle undisturbed by flies or grubs. Jynx slips away to poke around the exterior of the cottage by themselves for clues, while the remainder of the group shuffles into the meager dwelling. A large room serves as the kitchen, dining, and common space. 2 doors lead to other interior rooms. What little furniture there is simply built and uncomfortable looking. A wood-burning stove, a wooden washtub, a rickety shelf sparsely stocked with dry goods. The baby stirs to wakefulness, having slept the short walk home. Eager to repay her guests for their kindness, Ewella offers what hospitality she can. Hot water for spruce needle tea, though she hasn't the luxury of sugar. Massul declines, happy to have a tin cup of water instead. Not wanting to tarry too long, the dwarf inquires as to the troubles with her husband. The woman explains, interrupted occasionally by her fussing baby. Ned's Tavern, the Hearthstone, was completed nearly a year ago by her reckoning, built in the woods outside of town. Massul, Túrendil, and Rilyanasse find the thought of building an establishment such as that out in the middle of nowhere a strange proposition. A knock at the door interrupts the conversation, and a bent ancient woman lets herself in. A mess of white hair frames her weathered, wrinkled face. Instantly suspicious, Rill appraises the woman, but is relieved to find that among her rings and bracelets she wears a prominent 6-pointed religious symbol, that of the Hexad. The crone speaks with a sharpness, inquiring what the lot of them are doing in Ewella's business. Between Rill's honest answer of invited for a spruce tea and Massul's timely enjoying her company and taking a spell, the old woman seems dissatisfied with the answers given, narrowing her eyes. Túrendil inquires whether the old woman is a priestess, pointing out the iconography she prominently displays. She affirms his suspicions, introducing herself as Old Salma, priestess, midwife, and gravekeeper to the village, among other things. While the elves talk to the old woman, Massul steps out to check on the halfling, having noticed his friend's absence. He finds Jynx knelt down, eating a bit of soil near the cottage. The warpriest points out one of the signs of witchcraft he'd seen to the priestess. She scolds Ewella harshly for her laxness in informing Old Salma about such things. "Any other strange goings-on here, Ewella Ross?" Like a child in trouble with their parent, the new mother shrinks back at the scolding. Hesitantly, the party divulges to the priestess of the Hexad the other signs of witchcraft they discovered. Ewella sobs, ignorant to the signs of black magic within her home. Rill takes a moment to offer her company as emotional support to the distraught woman, as the halfling harasses the squawking chickens outside. Old Salma mentions she cannot stay long. The fishwives of town are meeting to discuss what to do with their husbands in the Hearthstone, the tavern they have been frequenting all too much. The young mother decries the owner's daughters for seducing the men of the town away from their wives and homes, but declines to go. "Them's fishwives is more than fed up, and Ezra needn't be seeing any of that mess." With Salma gone and Ewella calmed, the four are free to do as they wish. Rill and Túrendil speak up in favor of the meeting, with Jynx joining in, while Massul voices his suspicions concerning the Hearthstone. They settle on the meeting, being its closer. The ranger stays behind with her owl to keep an eye on the mother and her newborn. A heated discussion can be heard from within the rambling old boathouse, a sturdy structure built alongside the water. Draped fishing nets and worn crab pots are secured along the dock, with several men out beyond on the water plying their trade. An otherwise idyllic scene, cut by the sharp voice of an unfamiliar woman. "We cannot go on living like this! We need to take matters into our own hands!" Selma protests. "Why don't we just pay Ned to leave town and be rid of the problem?" The crowd mumbles indistinctly in discussion before the first voice cuts through. "We should go this evening! We'll burn the damn place to the ground! That'll sort it!" This agitates the crowd, and Old Salma's further protests and reasoning are drowned out in shouts of agreement and calls for action. The meeting begins to disperse, and the mob of irate fishwives finds our heroes outside their meeting place. "Men!" the first few spout upon sighting the adventurers. The voice from before, Benneth Loach, proclaims, "Spies! Sent by Ned! Seize them!" She indicates Túrendil and Massul.
"That's not a good idea, ladies."
The dwarf scowls and puts an edge to his voice, giving the mob pause. Túrendil asks about their problems with Ned, and Benneth Loach explains that the tavern opened some months ago, owned and operated by Ned and his 3 young daughters. All other women are barred from entry. She goes on to say that she's sure the girls are serving up more than just mead given their husbands. Massul explains that the group's goal is to help the town of Wayward and agrees to investigate Ned and the Hearthstone. Jynx nods in agreement to the plan. Benneth gives the 4 of them until midnight to sort things out, or she and her girls will be there with torches and oil to sort things out proper. She spits in her hand, offering it to the dwarf, who does likewise, sealing the bargain with a nasty handshake. Massul grins, complimenting the old fishwife on her strong grip. Before making straight for Ned Pascoe's place, the group decides to arm themselves with information. Eager to find a peaceful resolution to this mess, Old Salma offers to entertain them in her home and divulge what she knows. The old herbalist's cottage is a shock of green in the muddy, gloomy town. Wild roses creep up the walls, and the garden overflows with plants. A sign reading Herbalist with a painting of a snowflake formed of thorns hangs at the gate. She relays a bit of gossip about refugees fleeing a monster from the ferry at Mother's Crossing, confirming the party's original goal of pursuing the ferry folk displaced by the bandit Vance Stonegaze. Being a less pressing matter, Salma dismisses that topic of conversation and tells her tale. 15 years ago, witch hunters from Mulmaster chased a hag coven to the village. They butchered 2 of the hags, but the 3rd escaped unharmed. The coven's evil tainted the town for years afterwards, crops and marriages failing, animals sick. 12 years ago, the malady reached its peak when the local Lord Ethelred burned his manor down with himself and his family inside. That last hag must have returned. The men don't tend their wives no more, then animals are sick, the fishes stop spawning. I haven't told the town you saw how twitchy they get, and I'm no match for a hag. Were I to draw the evil eye of one, it'd be the end for me. Túrendil posits that Ned's daughters may be connected to the hag problem in some way, but Salma speaks up firmly. I don't think it's Ned's daughters. There's something odd going on there is, but my gut tells me it can't be them. They're sweet girls, though they are of that age. Salma pauses before the four of them set out. I haven't much to offer in the way of coin, but let me offer what aid I can, and the herbalist produces several healing potions to send with the party on their way. The way to the Hearthstone lies along a well-trodden forest trail, mist curling through the woods. The yip and snarl of canines is audible in the distance, and from the mist stumbles a panicked peasant girl in simple clothes with a shock of red hair, unnaturally aggressive wolves snapping at her heels. The four spring into action, Massul drawing his hammer and charging forward, Túrendil hurling a chakram, Rilyanasse firing arrows while directing her owl to aid the girl, and Jynx slinging a bullet from her staff. The wolves snap again, one finding purchase on the peasant with rending teeth. She goes unconscious. Túrendil charges in with his sword, slicing a wolf, while Massul swings his hammer in a wide arc, slaying the first and injuring the second. The combat clearly swings in the favor of the heroes after another round of fighting, and the remaining wolves hastily retreat into the midst of the forest. Magic and skill are employed to bring the girl back from the brink of death, and a short conversation reveals her name to be Zora Marrek, a daughter of a woodsman who lives around here. She was out gathering mushrooms for dinner and was attacked by the wolves. She mentions she's not been feeling well, even since before being beset by wolves. Rilyanasse tries her best to diagnose the unwell lass, but is unable to determine the cause of whatever malady she may have. The four of them escort Zora back to her cottage and decide that at least one of them needs to take her to consult with old Salma, as she may have the knowledge to diagnose and mend the girl, resolving to return and take her back to town as soon as they're finished at the tavern. The Hearthstone Tavern stands on the bank of the estuary on the edge of the woods. It leans against a boulder from a bygone age, an old road marker from the time when giants ruled these lands. The sign outside reads, "No women allowed," sparking some choice commentary. Rilyanasse decides to watch from the woods outside, as she suspects entry into the tavern will be difficult for her. Massul, Jynx, and Túrendil approach the tavern after Jynx goes to the effort of disguising themselves to appear definitively male. The three enter the bustling but gloomy tavern after some investigation of the rock the building leans against, finding a table in the north end of the candlelit, straw-floored tap room, as patrons wince at the light from the open door. As expected from Ewella's description and the hubbub in town, three gorgeous barmaids glide between the tables bearing trays of drink and food. One calls out a welcome to the Hearthstone and instructs them to seat themselves. One of the barmaids approaches the adventurer's table to take their order. Massul asks about the special, followed by Túrendil ordering a water and trying to make conversation about how unusual it is to find a tavern in the middle of the Cormanthyr forest. Massul rapidly takes over the conversation, however, ordering a round of Symbian Dark for the table and bantering with the waitress over her call of 2.5 beers to the kitchen.
Haven't seen the appetite on this one. He's got a stomach like an elephant.
The three of them notice one of the fishermen belly up to the bar and drop a fishing lure into a bucket sitting on the countertop. Their keen ears hear him say, "Think I'll be a lucky one tonight?" The barkeep, doubtless the infamous Ned Pasco, says it's none of his business as he fills 3 mugs with the stout. Across the room, one of the townsfolk starts to get handsy with a waitress, only to withdraw when she stomps on his foot. Ned hollers across the tap room to keep his hands to himself or he'd find somewhere else to drink. Túrendil arches an eyebrow at this. It doesn't sound like what the fishwives think it is. After a few minutes, one of the girls approaches with their beers. As she approaches the table, Jynx suddenly realizes they can't breathe. They do their best to hide it, but soon the sensation of drowning becomes too much. They kick Massul under the table, sputtering something about having dropped something in the straw before passing out on the floor. Massul tries to bluff helping Jynx out as Túrendil bolts to his feet, but they don't get far before Ned Pasco roars out, "Gods damn it, you didn't read the sign! It said no women allowed!" Massul drops Jynx outside the door and tries to clear her airway, but Ned further shouts to, "Get her far away!" Massul bolts, carrying the stricken halfling. This concludes this episode of Crusade for Myth Drannor, but the adventure is clearly not over. Join us next week to find Jynx's fate as we continue our adventures in the Crusade for Myth Drannor. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we will see you for the rest of the adventure.